Rain pelted the city like a relentless drumbeat, drenching the streets in silvery streaks that reflected neon signs and passing headlights. Inside the grand windows of the Khan residence, the warm glow of chandeliers contrasted sharply with the cold storm outside. Armand Khan, a man in his late 30s, adjusted his crisp shirt sleeves as he went over the final details of the property deal that would secure the family fortune. The papers were neatly stacked on the polished mahogany table, but Armand's mind was elsewhere, unsettled, uneasy. It wasn't just the storm that made him uneasy. Lately, he had felt it in the quiet moments, the way his younger brother Samir looked at him. A flicker of resentment, masked by polite smiles, lingered in Samir's dark eyes. Armand had noticed the subtle signs, disappearing for long calls, muttering under his breath about debts, sneaking into rooms when he thought no one was looking, but had dismissed them as normal sibling jealousy. Tonight, however, something felt different. Samir arrived for dinner, his coat damp, hair plastered to his forehead from the rain, and his smile slightly too wide. The tension in the room was immediate, almost tangible. Nadia, Armand's wife, a perceptive woman in her mid-30s, watched from the dining table as Samir took his seat. Her instincts pricked, sensing that under his carefully rehearsed charm, something darker lurked. "Busy day, Armand?" Samir asked casually, pouring himself a glass of water. His voice was smooth, controlled, but there was an edge to it that made Armand's gut tighten. "Yes, closing the property deal. Everything's ready for signatures tomorrow," Armand replied, keeping his tone light but cautious. He avoided Samir's gaze for too long. Nadia's eyes flicked between the two brothers, her intuition screaming. There was a storm inside that room far worse than the one outside. Dinner proceeded like a performance. Conversations skirted around banal topics, family, work, trivial neighborhood gossip, but the undercurrent of unspoken words charged the air. Samir, while laughing at a joke, allowed a brief glance at Armand's hands, resting too close to the property documents. Nadia noticed but said nothing. She wasn't sure if she wanted to confront the tension or let it unravel naturally. After dinner, the brothers excused themselves to the study. Armand had to review some last-minute changes, while Samir insisted he needed to check the accounts. Alone now, the room's shadows seemed longer, heavier. Samir's eyes lingered on Armand as he sorted through the papers. In his mind, numbers were more than figures. They were leverage, power, and the key to freedom from the crushing debts that had been suffocating him for months. "You've worked hard for this," Samir said finally, voice soft, almost brotherly. I hope you remember who helped you get here." Armand paused, pen hovering above a document. He said carefully, uncertain if he understood the true weight behind Samir's words. "I do. You've always been there when it mattered." A faint smirk crossed Samir's lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Behind it was something darker, a seed of envy and greed that had been quietly growing. The night deepened, and the rain outside became a steady roar, a white noise that made the silence inside the house even more pronounced. Armand finally stood, stretching, unaware that this would be the last evening he would spend in the house as he knew it. When Armand returned to the dining room to grab his coat, he noticed something strange. Samir's laptop left open on the table, a spreadsheet flickering with numbers that didn't make sense. Nadia entered at that moment, catching sight of the screen. Her heart sank. "What's this?" she asked softly. Samir's head snapped up, eyes wide as if caught red-handed. "Nothing, just old accounts. Don't worry about it." But Nadia's instincts told otherwise. She frowned, sensing deception in every carefully measured word, every too-quick glance. The storm outside seemed to echo the tension inside, a battle of wills, though neither could admit it aloud. Armand, unaware of the undercurrents, kissed Nadia on the forehead and left for a late-night errand, saying he would be back in an hour. He drove through the rain, windshield wipers slashing across the glass, feeling a strange unease that he couldn't shake. It wasn't just the storm. Something felt off, an invisible weight pressing against him, a warning unspoken. Back at the house, Samir lingered in the shadows, watching his brother leave. He whispered to himself, a barely audible vow. "It will be mine. Everything." The words were a promise, a dark testament to a plan forming slowly, methodically. Hours passed. The rain continued, relentless and cold. Nadia, uneasy, tried calling Armand's phone. It went straight to voicemail. Then again and again. Each unanswered call tightened the knot of fear in her chest. Finally, at 2:47 a.m., a message arrived on her phone. She opened it with trembling hands. "If anything happens to me, trust no one." Her breath caught in her throat. The room seemed to tilt. She read the message again. Trust no one. Who could she mean? The storm outside roared as if emphasizing the dread settling into her bones. She ran to the study, checking the documents, the spreadsheets, anything that could give a clue, but the papers were exactly where they had been. No sign of struggle, no indication of danger. The audience feels the tension, the quiet dread, the family betrayal looming like a shadow over the house. The part ends with Nadia staring out the rain-streaked window, lights reflecting off the wet pavement, and whispering, "What have you done, Samir?" And somewhere, unseen, Samir stands in the darkness of the study, a shadow among shadows, smiling just enough to hint at the chaos he's about to unleash. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the streets glistening and the air sharp with cold. But inside the Khan residence, the tension was far from over. Nadia paced the living room, phone in hand, replaying Armand's cryptic message in her head. "If anything happens to me, trust no one." Each word sounded heavier than the last, pressing on her chest like a lead weight. She tried to calm herself, but fear gnawed at her, knowing something sinister was unfolding under her own roof. By mid-morning, the absence of Armand had become undeniable. He hadn't returned from his errand. Calls to his mobile went unanswered. Nadia called his office, and the receptionist, unaware of the gravity, said simply, "He never arrived this morning." Panic tightened its grip. She alerted the neighbors, but no one had seen him. It was as if Armand had vanished into thin air. Detectives arrived by noon, taking statements and documenting the scene. Inspector Raza, a seasoned investigator with a sharp eye for deceit, examined the study where Armand had last been. Papers were in order, yet something felt off. "This isn't just a disappearance," he muttered to his partner, Detective Farah. "Someone's planning this, and it's someone close." Meanwhile, Samir moved with a calm that belied the storm brewing inside him. In his mind, the night's plans had begun to take shape. The property documents, the financial manipulations, the debts owed to dangerous lenders. It was all part of a web he had carefully woven. He had always been in Armand's shadow, always second best. Now, he whispered to himself, he would step out, taking everything that rightfully, or so he told himself, belonged to him. The detectives began combing through Armand's recent activities. Security footage from the previous night revealed Samir entering the warehouse on the outskirts of the city. At first glance, it seemed innocent. He claimed he had to check office files, but closer inspection revealed he had lingered, loitering near Armand's private office long after everyone had left. The footage set off warning bells. Inspector Raza leaned back, studying it intently. "He's hiding something," Raza said. Farah nodded, "and he knows more than he's telling us." Inside the Khan residence, Nadia discovered something unsettling. She had always managed the household accounts, but she noticed discrepancies, transactions she hadn't authorized, bank transfers to unknown accounts, and documents with altered signatures. Panic gave way to suspicion. Could Samir really be behind this? She remembered his anxious whispers about debt, his secret late-night phone calls, and his uncanny interest in Armand's property. A cold dread settled over her as pieces began to fit together, forming a picture she wasn't ready to confront. Outside, the detectives visited the warehouse. The place was dimly lit, dust motes floating in shafts of morning sunlight. A torn shirt caught on a nail near the back office caught Farah's attention. Blood, faint but unmistakable, stained the fabric. Her stomach churned. The forensic team swabbed it immediately, while Inspector Raza studied the scene. "This is no ordinary disappearance," he muttered. "Something went very wrong here." Flashbacks revealed Samir's meticulous planning. Weeks ago, he had begun borrowing money from shadowy lenders at high interest, claiming emergencies and misfortune. He had met with them in secret, assuring them repayment he had no intention of making unless he could seize Armand's fortune. Each day the web tightened, each lie building upon another until the moment of confrontation felt inevitable. That evening, Nadia confronted Samir, trying to gauge his reactions. "Samir, Armand hasn't come home. Do you know anything?" Her voice trembled, though she tried to steady it. Samir's face betrayed nothing, his eyes calm but calculating. I haven't seen him since last night. Maybe he got caught in the storm." He paused, then added casually, "You know him, always walking in the rain for no reason." Nadia studied him, searching for cracks. There were none, yet a faint, uncharacteristic smirk tugged at his lips, barely noticeable. It was enough to make her uneasy. Something about the calm felt wrong. It was a practiced calm, not worry. As night fell again, tension escalated. Inspector Raza and Farah sat reviewing all evidence in the office. Calls to neighbors, co-workers, and friends yielded nothing, but the blood-stained shirt, coupled with financial irregularities, pointed towards a close family member. "Think about it," Raza said. "Who has motive, means, and access?" He didn't need to answer. Both of them knew. Meanwhile, Samir could feel the walls closing in. He paced his apartment, thinking through his story, anticipating questions, imagining how easily he could manipulate the narrative. But deep down, a flicker of doubt, of fear seeped in. He hadn't accounted for Nadia's intuition, for her sharp mind. If she began asking questions, if she dug deeper, everything could unravel. That night, Nadia sat alone in the living room, revisiting Armand's files, piecing together the transactions and phone records. Her fingers trembled as she realized just how methodical Samir had been. Each detail, each deviation from normal behavior began to form a terrifying picture. This wasn't just a disappearance, it was a calculated betrayal, a slow, deliberate act of greed that could destroy everything they had. In a cinematic sequence, the audience glimpses Samir's internal monologue, showing his desperation, rationalization, and obsession. "He's mine," he whispers to himself. "Everything he's earned, everything he's worked for, it belongs to me." It's chilling because the audience sees the collision of ambition and moral decay, the slow erosion of humanity by greed. As part 2 closes, the tension peaks. Armand remains missing. Clues are emerging. Blood-stained evidence, financial manipulation, suspicious movements. Nadia's suspicions are growing, yet she cannot confront Samir without proof. The detectives are closing in, connecting the dots, and the audience is left on edge, knowing that the inevitable confrontation is just around the corner. Cliffhanger for part 3. The audience is left questioning, will Nadia uncover the truth before it's too late? Can Samir maintain his carefully constructed facade? And is Armand truly alive, or has greed already claimed its victim? The city was quiet at first, deceptively calm, as if nature itself held its breath. But inside the Khan residence, the air was electric with unspoken suspicion. Nadia had spent hours reviewing documents, phone records, and financial transactions, piecing together a mosaic of betrayal. Every detail pointed toward one undeniable truth. Samir was hiding something, and it wasn't trivial. By now, Inspector Raza and Detective Farah were moving fast. New forensic reports had come in confirming that the blood found in the warehouse belonged to Arman Khan. It wasn't just a missing persons case anymore, it was a murder investigation. The weight of this revelation hung over Nadia like a storm cloud. She confronted Samir that evening, alone in the dimly lit living room. Shadows flickered against the walls from the lamp, casting long, tense silhouettes. "Samir," she said, her voice steady but cold, "the detectives have evidence. They know about the warehouse, the blood. Tell me the truth. Did you—" Samir interrupted, his expression calm but calculating. "Nadia, you're imagining things. I don't know what you're talking about." But Nadia wasn't fooled. She held up the laptop with the altered financial documents and glared at him. "Don't lie to me. I know everything. The transfers, the forged signatures, your meetings with lenders, and now Arman is gone." For the first time, a flicker of unease crossed Samir's face. Not panic, but the tiniest crack in his composed facade. He laughed softly, almost mockingly. "You've always been smart, Nadia. Too smart. But maybe you're reading between lines where there are none." She stepped closer, voice rising. "There are lines, Samir, and I can see them. You wanted everything. His wealth, his life, and you took it. Admit it." The tension in the room was unbearable, as if the walls themselves were pressing in. Samir's calm mask faltered for a moment, revealing the boiling mix of fear and anger beneath. "You don't understand. He left me no choice. He never appreciated me. He never trusted me. A sudden knock at the door interrupted him. Inspector Raza and Detective Farah had arrived, their presence sharp and commanding. "We need to talk, Samir," Raza said, stepping inside. His eyes, hard and unwavering, met Samir's. Farah motioned to Nadia, who quietly stepped back, observing the confrontation. The detectives laid out the evidence methodically: security footage, financial tampering, the warehouse blood, witness statements. Each piece was a hammer striking Samir's carefully constructed alibi. He tried to deflect, blaming business rivals and claiming he was being framed, but the evidence was relentless, closing in like a trap. In that tense moment, a witness, the night guard, stepped forward. He had been hesitant at first, but now confirmed what everyone feared. "I heard them arguing," he said, voice shaking. "Two men. I couldn't see clearly, but it sounded violent. I think it was the brothers." Samir's eyes flickered with panic. He knew the web he had woven was unraveling thread by thread. Desperation clawed at him, but pride and greed still held him back from confessing. He shook his head, trying to maintain control. "This isn't how it happened," he said, voice low, almost pleading. He was supposed to. It got out of hand. I didn't mean—" Inspector Raza's gaze hardened. "Out of hand, Samir. Arman's blood was found in the warehouse. The evidence points to a deliberate confrontation, not an accident. Tell us the truth before it gets worse." The room seemed to contract, time stretching in a tense, almost cinematic beat. Samir's mind raced. He replayed the confrontation in the warehouse, the moment when greed had eclipsed brotherly love. He remembered Arman refusing to sign over any property early, refusing to forgive his debts, refusing to see him as an equal. Panic had turned into rage, rage into action. In a moment of uncontrollable fury, he had strangled his own brother, then hidden the body at a remote construction site nearby. The first crack in Samir's armor appeared as he realized denial was futile. Nadia's eyes, sharp and accusing, pierced him. "Just admit it," she said softly, almost sorrowfully. "It's over. There's no hiding." The second crack came when the detectives produced a small but damning piece of evidence: Armand's watch, broken and smeared with blood, found hidden near a shipment of lumber at the warehouse. The proof was undeniable. Samir's knees buckled slightly, and the room seemed to tilt around him. Finally, in a chilling, hollow voice, Samir confessed, not out of remorse, but exhaustion and inevitability. It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he muttered. I just wanted him to understand me, to give me what I deserved. I didn't mean for this." Nadia felt a sick twist in her stomach. Her husband was gone, her brother-in-law was a murderer, and the wealth that once promised security now symbolized nothing but destruction. She sank into a chair, covering her face, silently praying the nightmare was ending. Inspector Raza placed a firm hand on Samir's shoulder. "You'll face justice. Every last detail will come out in court." But the true horror was not just legal, it was emotional. The betrayal had fractured the family, destroyed trust, and left an indelible scar on Nadia's life. She realized greed had not only killed Armand physically, but it also poisoned the love, trust, and loyalty that had held the family together. As night fell, the warehouse lights were extinguished. Outside, the city seemed to mourn with her, wet streets reflecting the chaos within. Armand's absence was a shadow that would never leave, and Samir's confession marked the irreversible fracture of what had once been a bond between brothers. The audience is left in a tense state. The crime is known, the betrayal exposed, but the emotional consequences linger. The questions now shift from what happened to what comes next. Who will face justice, and what will remain of the family? The stage is set for the final part, the shocking resolution and consequences of greed. The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and made breathing heavy. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, catching dust motes in the air, but there was no warmth. Inside, Nadia Khan sat rigidly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes fixed on the man who had once been her husband's younger brother. Samir Khan, now pale and hollow-eyed, sat at the defendant's table. His earlier confidence and calculated calm were gone, replaced by exhaustion, guilt, and the shadow of inevitability. The trial had begun with the cold efficiency of the law. Prosecutors laid out the evidence methodically: the blood found at the warehouse, the financial manipulations, the surveillance footage placing Samir at the scene, and the testimonies of witnesses who had heard the fatal confrontation. Each piece was a nail in the coffin, each word tightening the noose of justice. Nadia listened silently as her life unfolded in front of strangers. Every betrayal, every lie, every moment of greed that had culminated in Armand's death was spelled out in graphic detail. She felt anger, sorrow, and disbelief twist together like steel in her chest. But above all, she felt a grim resolve. Justice had to prevail, not for vengeance, but to honor Armand's memory and reclaim some sense of truth. When the prosecutor called Nadia to the stand, the courtroom leaned in. Her testimony was calm but unwavering, recounting Samir's subtle manipulations, the forged documents, and the tension that had grown between the brothers. "I trusted him," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I wanted to believe it was jealousy, not malice. But greed has no conscience. It destroys everything it touches." The defense attempted to paint Samir as desperate, financially pressured, and mentally unstable, a man pushed to the edge. But the evidence was relentless. Expert testimony confirmed premeditation. The night of Armand's disappearance was reconstructed in chilling detail. Samir lured his brother to the warehouse under the pretense of resolving financial matters. The confrontation escalated, and in a moment of uncontrolled rage and desperation, he strangled him. The plan to hide the body and manipulate financial records had failed, leaving an undeniable trail. Throughout the proceedings, Samir rarely looked at Nadia. When he did, his eyes were hollow, devoid of remorse or defiance. The audience watching the trial, the jury, the public, and the family members sensed the collapse of a man consumed by his own greed. Outside the courtroom, the press swarmed, hungry for every detail. The story had become national news, a family torn apart by ambition, betrayal, and murder. Neighbors who once admired the Khan family whispered about the shocking tragedy, their fascination tinged with horror. Armin, a man remembered for his generosity and fairness, had been struck down not by a stranger, but by the very person he had trusted most. As the trial moved towards sentencing, the final moments were stark, almost cinematic. The judge, a stern figure with decades of experience, reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the sequence of events. This court finds the defendant, Samir Khan, guilty of murder in the first degree, the judge pronounced, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. Sentencing is life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Samir remained seated, expression blank, as if the words had been expected. He had taken Armin's life for greed, and now the law had stripped him of freedom. Justice, cold and exacting, had been served. Outside, Nadia stood in the sunlight, feeling the weight of grief press down on her. Armin was gone, the family fractured beyond repair. The estate that once symbolized prosperity now symbolized betrayal, sorrow, and loss. She walked through the empty halls of the house, memories echoing, laughing dinners, whispered dreams, small acts of kindness that now felt like ghosts. Determined to reclaim her life, Nadia made a choice. She would leave the house and the town behind. The property, once a prize to be inherited, would be sold. The money, though tainted by tragedy, would be used to start anew. It was not about wealth anymore. It was about survival, about reclaiming agency in a world that had been shattered by greed. In a quiet moment, Nadia reflected on the full scope of the tragedy. Armin's death was not just a loss of life, it was the destruction of trust, the unraveling of family, and the dark reminder of human nature's fragility. Greed, she realized, is insidious. It creeps into hearts, poisons relationships, and blinds even the most loving people to betrayal. Samir had crossed the ultimate line, and now he would live with the consequences, confined not just physically, but morally and spiritually. The narrative shifts to a broader reflection. The city, once the backdrop to the Khan family's prosperity, now seemed indifferent, continuing its relentless rhythm as if the tragedy had been just another story in its streets. Life went on, but the shadow of what had occurred lingered like a stain on memory. The audience, having witnessed the rise of tension, the collision of greed and morality, and the devastation left in its wake, is left to consider the haunting question: how far would you go when ambition eclipses conscience? The story closes with Nadia standing by the front gate of the house for the last time. The wind tugs at her coat, carrying the faint scent of rain from the distant storm. She looks back one final time, letting the past go, her eyes steeled with determination. Though the family she knew is gone, she carries with her a hardened sense of truth, a lesson forged in sorrow. Greed may kill, but justice and courage endure. The camera, or the mind's eye of the audience, lingers on the empty estate, silent and haunting, a testament to the cost of betrayal. Then, slowly, it fades to black.